Wonderful day, wonderful day, wonderful day indeed. This is your neighborhood Sensei Fouché, and I begin all my shows by first strongly suggesting, because a lot of folks don't like being told what to do, true indeed. So moving forward in conversation, I most emphatically implore for all of you beautiful, wonderful, self-loving, worthy individuals to stay woke. But in the process, never get all stressed out, you know what I'm saying? Make sure you take any necessary meditative practices and procedures, including environmental change when and if necessary, to relax. And always, 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 always be prepared to take those notes. Last conversation, we introduced a new series that I am going to cover in random. The acronym is WEWAG, which stands for Whenever Was America Great? And this has recently come up in the motto of the MAGA political base, Make America Great Again. And that could easily be argued, depending on who you're speaking to and whether they have the closest of identification with specific time periods and having a vast amount of data collected in percentages, where you have polls and you polling people and questioning them as to their opinions. You know what I'm saying? One person stating something or a group of a larger demographic of people stating something doesn't necessarily make that hold true. You know what I'm saying? The old saying is beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. What one person finds beautiful, another person doesn't find as attractive. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't mean that there isn't any value. It just means that everyone has their own opinion, and to each their own, depending on, their personal preferences as well as their experiences. The thing that I find interesting is when we become so egocentric in our identifications, our own identifications, and creating extreme prejudicial viewpoints. In this chapter coming up, and the book that we're covering, and we're going to get back into this week, I had to take a break from our last conversation again, like I was stating in the opening, is because I wanted to introduce a new series of conversation which is going to randomly be recorded whenever was America great. And we're going to bring up a lot of itemized timeline periods as to state the facts of what was going on from an unprejudicial collection of references, because it's just information. You know what I'm saying? And that's how I just deal with things, is the information. And based on the actual information, not skewed information. Someone that would be considered an iconic business figure, let's say JP Morgan, you know what I'm saying? For anyone that would know that name, or Thomas Edison, the quote unquote creator of the light bulb, you know what I'm saying? But even that, with facts, is extremely debatable whether he was solely responsible for the creation of the light bulb. I mean, they give him all the credit, but it really wasn't just about him. So why do we create, these exaggerated or fictitious labels to try to glorify our explanations into who we be? We're in chapter 9 of this fantastic novel by Lindsay C. Gibson again. In chapter 9, and this is our second part of chapter 9, which is titled, How It Feels to Live Free of Roles and Fantasies. How does it feel to, be free into being who you choose to be, as opposed to, feeling like you have to prove yourself to certain people and not feel like, and not be authentic, to live unauthentically within these environments or relationships. You know what I'm saying? You don't want to be labeled the black sheep. You don't want to be ostracized or labeled an outcast. You don't fit in. It makes you feel insecure to be titled different or an outcast or a black sheep. You know what I'm saying? So then you start pretending and living an existence that isn't authentic, and trying to prove or make someone else or please someone else to make them happy, but realistically, they don't respect you. And they will feel like they have control over you and own you. And also, to be realistic, it doesn't make you feel comfortable, and you are extremely uneasy and feel high anxiousness when you are within these relationships or within these environments. So how comfortable do you feel in playing the pretend role? You know what I'm saying? A lot of times you would say, I wish I can be the real me. And then my question is, why not? Why haven't you already started that? If these people can't appreciate and honor your authentic self, and in moments agree to disagree and not try to minimize you by your opinions, what's the worth or value of being in that environment or being in that relationship? They think they're the greatest thing ever, you know what I'm saying? But realistically, you're like, man, you got a lot of flaws, and you really don't make me feel important or make me feel good about myself or feel good being within your presence. But since I make myself believe that you need me or I need you, or that this relationship is supposed to be important, or I'm supposed to hold on to this in this disrespectful state of being and regard it as high value or importantly needed, you know what I'm saying? You fooling yourself. If you think that that is what is going to label you as an honorable person, you are far off, because from the outside looking in, you know, a lot of people will not respect you and they will consider you weak and fake. And even though, you know, being authentic may not be, you know, completely agreeable to different opinions, it will be respected and honored because of the authenticity. So, was your parent difficult, immature, or emotionally unavailable? If you grew up with an emotionally immature, unavailable, or selfish parent, you may have lingering feelings of anger, loneliness, betrayal, or abandonment. You may recall your childhood as a time when your emotional needs were not met, when your feelings were dismissed, or when you took on adult levels of responsibility in an effort to compensate for your parents' behavior. These wounds can be healed, and you can move forward in your life. So before we go into our reading context, again, you know, in reference to this country and the motto of this MAGA political base, make America great again. You know, and the POTUS is out here screaming about how great he is and he's the best this, and he's done this for so on and so forth. And he's speaking for so many people as opposed to them speaking for themselves. And the question is, why? And it's rhetorical, because if we have been following and covering the information, not only within this novel, but also The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, which was our first novel of coverage from, you know, the beginning of the year. And maybe not the beginning of the year. I think maybe in around April, I may have started the conversations into The Power of Now. But the outside opinion looking in would be the true validation. Because right now, I don't hear a lot of other nations or people in society saying how great America is. And the numbers don't lie. There's less people coming to visit as tourists, or even the investments into the United States is really starting to suffer, as well as being retracted. These agreements are being retracted. So if people are starting to veer and steer away from your direction, does that really seem agreeable or respectable or liked or most stated great? I mean, think about a sports game. Like if you so-called stating that Your team's the greatest. My team's the best team in the whole entire world planet. You go to the stadium, half the arena or half the stadium is filled, and halfway in the course of competition, another half of that crowd, of the half that is already in the arena or stadium, they walk out. But then, your star player is stating how great he is, so on and so forth, but you're not winning. You don't have championships behind you. But you're saying how great you are. You're the best. Well, usually the best not only be about it more than talk about it, but they actually have the documentation or the idled accolades, and I'm speaking in reference of trophies or awards or any kind of accommodation, to back up that credibility. The only way that you will be great is by being within your egoless, authentic self. So, now that we finished this long opening, let's go into some reading. Freedom to set limits and choose how much to give. While suspending contact is sometimes necessary, some people are able to set limits so effectively that their parents simply don't have an opportunity to do more harm. One way to do this is to take control of how frequently you're in contact with your parents. By setting limits on contacts, you can devote more energy to your own needs for self-care. Your parents may protest when you aren't as generous with your time or attention as you used to be. However, these difficult moments present a priceless opportunity to get over any irrational guilt for having needs of your own. If you're an internalizer, you'll be inclined to feel that the answer to any problem is for you to make things better, and that if you try a little harder, the situation, including others' behavior, will improve. It's such a relief to realize that this is not true. More often, internalizers keep trying harder and externalizers keep taking advantage of this. Your job is to take care of yourself regardless of what others think you should be doing for them. Paying attention to subtle energy drains from other people can help you realize when you're giving too much. Even in minor encounters, you can adjust how much you give so you won't be exhausted by trying to fulfill others' needs. I recommend using the maturity awareness mindset to observe how your parents or people react when you ask them to respect your boundaries. Notice whether they try to make you feel ashamed and guilty, as if they have a right to do whatever they want, regardless of how it affects you. Now, back to the whole government thing what we have going on in these states of America. I mean, think about transgenders or any form of brown people. For transgenders, they want to make you feel guilty for being the person who you choose to be and want to change you into being who they want you to be, because they state that you are wrong in how you choose to identify yourself. They're right in who they want you to be, and you're wrong in feeling comfortable and loving into your authentic self. They want to label your authenticity of what they think it should be as opposed to what you feel you need to be. Paying attention to subtle energy drains from other people can help you realize when you're giving too much. And I started reading over. So let's turn the page and get into our next. There we go. And let me read that over since I guess I started. Even in minor encounters, you can adjust how much you give so you won't be exhausted by trying to fulfill others' needs. So again, paying attention to subtle energy drains from other people can help you realize when you're giving too much. Even in minor encounters, you can adjust how much you give so you won't be exhausted by trying to fulfill others' needs. I recommend using the maturity awareness mindset to observe how your parents react when you ask them to respect your boundaries. Notice whether they try to make you feel ashamed and guilty, as if they have a right to do whatever they want, regardless of how it affects you. In order to take care of yourself, you need to feel compassion for yourself. Knowing your own feelings and having sympathy for yourself are two basic building blocks of strong individuality. Only if you have self-compassion will you know when to set limits or stop giving excessively. Extending compassion to yourself can be so healing, yet it can also feel quite unnatural at first. Liberation is scary at first, to try to liberate yourself from the constraint and constriction of that extreme conservatism. Once you start to use and practice the art of liberation, you begin to enjoy it more and more. Grief and tears are normal response, or grief and tears are a normal response to the dawning, Grief and tears are a normal response to the dawning of self-compassion, arising as we come to grips with painful truths that are hard to take in. If you spent many years not being validated, you've probably suppressed sadness more than any other emotion. Feeling deep emotion is our way of processing important new information. Being conscious of our emotions, including grief, is how we do the inner work of psychological growth. When you cry, these deeper tears of realization, you ultimately end up feeling better. This kind of crying helps you develop into a more integrated and complex person and will leave you feeling more settled and able to regroup. So if you are going through a very extreme emotional moment where you feel you don't feel validated and you feel hurt in how you were treated within these relationships or within society, find a personal, private moment to exhaust yourself of that sorrow and that sunken, sullen feeling by crying. Let it all out. And once you cry it out, you will start to process that rebelief into continuing forward into your authentic self. Regaining the ability to feel for yourself comes in waves, and some of these waves can be very intense. Having a lot of unprocessed emotion to integrate can feel overwhelming. You'll benefit from reaching out to a compassionate friend or therapist for comfort and support to help you through these times. But don't be afraid of this natural process. Your body knows how to cry and grieve. If you let your feelings arise and keep trying to understand them, you'll come out of the experience a more integrated, mature person with greater compassion for both yourself and others. I might have to be like my man Packboy and read this over and be a two-time reader, as he says. And I know that I've done this a lot in being an example to others that also do this. Regaining the ability to feel for yourself comes in waves, and some of these waves can be very intense. Having a lot of unprocessed emotion to integrate can feel overwhelming. You'll benefit from reaching out to a compassionate friend or therapist for comfort and support to help you through these times, but don't be afraid of this natural process. This is the part. Your body knows how to cry and grieve. If you let your feelings arise and keep trying to understand them, not try to dismiss your feelings, but face your feelings, you'll come out of the experience a more integrated, mature person with greater compassion for both yourself and others. Internalizers are so emotionally sensitive that they can go overboard in feeling empathy for other people's problems or what they imagine other people's suffering to be. Sometimes they end up feeling worse about another person's situation than the other person does. Man, I say this all the time. If I am more passionate about what's wrong with you than you are, then I really can't help you. With healthy empathy, on the other hand, you can have compassion without losing awareness of your own limits. Growing up with emotionally immature parents may have caused you to feel helpless, both as a child and as an adult. Their lack of emotional attentiveness can make it feel as though what you want doesn't matter. You may have been convinced that all you could do was wait until someone felt like giving you what you need. It's important to realize that childhood experiences of profound helplessness can feel traumatic, causing people to later react to adult feelings of helplessness with sensations of collapse and feeling of there's nothing I can do and no one will help me. As children, sensitive internalizers can be so affected by this feeling that later they're prone to feel like victims with no control, at the mercy of powerful people who refuse to give them what they desperately need. Even if this victim reaction is deeply ingrained, you can always reclaim your right to ask for help, and even more importantly, to keep on asking for help as often as necessary. Action on your own behalf is the antidote to traumatic feelings of helplessness. Although being raised by emotionally immature parents gave you a very limited sampling of what life and relationships have to offer, hopefully you're starting to realize how expansive the possibilities are and that you owe it to yourself to ask for what you need. Freedom to express yourself. Expressing yourself, hold on, let me take a sip of water. Expressing yourself with emotionally immature people is an important act of self-affirmation, one that implicitly stakes your claim to exist as an individual with your own feelings and thoughts. Remember, an important step to maturity awareness approach is expressing yourself and then letting go. Don't hold on to those very intense feelings. Let them go. It's important to relinquish the belief that if your parents or people loved you, they'd understand you. As an independent adult, you can function without their understanding. You don't need their validity. You know what I'm saying? You can function without their validity. If you feel like you can't function without their validity, that's a you problem, way more than a them problem. You may not ever have the kind of relationship you've wanted with your parents, but you can make each interaction with them more satisfying for you. Forget about making them feel good. Focus on making yourself feel good, and being authentic is going to make you happy. You can speak up politely when you feel like it and be different without offering excuses. By expressing yourself to your parents in this way, you can be authentic, even in the absence of their understanding. The point of expressing your feelings is to be true to yourself, not to change your parents or other people. And there's always the likelihood that they can still love you even if they don't get you at all. And that's honor and respect because you're able to stand up for yourself. You can interact with your parents in new ways that shake up old patterns and keep the focus on the outcome you're seeking. By taking it one interaction at a time, you can experiment with setting aside any unrealistic desires for genuine emotional connection or support from your parents or people. You aren't denying your past, you're just accepting your parents or people as they are without expectations. Like, you know that they're not going to give you the kind of respect that you're looking for. If you eliminate the expectation, then you minimize the disappointment. Sometimes parents will respond to this kind of honesty and neutrality by relating in a more emotionally genuine way. Though it may seem paradoxical, they may open up more once you stop wanting them to change. You just let them be who they are and you be who you need to be. And through time, they will respect your assertiveness or realize your individualism. When you seem strong and they sense that you no longer need their approval, they may be able to relax more. As you stop trying to win their attention, the emotional intensity ebbs to a point where they sometimes can tolerate more openness because they're no longer terrified that your needs will trap them in unbearable levels of emotional intimacy. They may be able to respond to you as they would any other adult. They're going to respect you at least on their level or above them instead of way below them. And maybe just a tad below because they will be your parent, but they will honor and respect you as a functioning adult, as opposed to an adolescent. Because you're still their child, but you're an adult child, not an adolescent child. The catch, let me read the last sentence over and then we'll forward. Because they're no longer terrified that your needs will trap them in unbearable levels of emotional intimacy, they may be able to respond to you as they would any other adult with more reasonableness and courtesy. The catch is that this can only happen if you've truly relinquished the need for a deep relationship with them. You need to detach that strongest of attachment, and that's how it's going to begin to work. So again, the only way this can happen is that if you've truly relinquished the need for a deep relationship with them. And it may not happen even then. But if you can stay true to yourself, detach emotionally, and interact without expectations, you'll be less likely to trigger your parents' defenses against intimacy. And by giving up your healing fantasy about changing your parents, you let them be who they are. When they're no longer under pressure to change, they may be able to treat you differently or not. It doesn't really matter. But you have to be able to create the boundary and say, enough is enough. I'm not going to have you disrespect me, whether we are going to continue to be in a relationship, close or not. Your job is to be okay either way. The most painful interactions with emotionally immature parents occur when their children need something from them. Whether it's attention, love, or communication, many neglected children continue to seek some kind of positive emotional regard from their parents well into adulthood, even though their parents aren't the giving type. Emotionally immature parents commonly promote the myth that parents are the only source of their children's well-being and self-esteem. You know what I'm saying? And that's almost emotional manipulation. It's not almost, I was just seeking the word. But that exactly is what is called emotional manipulation. I'm trying to figure out where I stepped off. We'll just read over from the beginning of the paragraph. Emotionally immature parents commonly promote the myth that parents are the only source of their children's well-being and self-esteem. Many self-involved parents like it when their child is needy and they can be the center of the child's longing. And that's mostly because that immature parent needs that attention, so then they'll use the need for the child's attention to fuel and feed their attention. If the child goes along with this, the parents gain the power to completely control their child's emotional state. The idea of stepping back and asking yourself whether you really need your parents or whether they need you to need them might seem radical. But if it weren't for family roles and fantasies, your parents might not even be the kind of people you'd seek anything from. Basically, if they weren't your parents, would those be the kind of people that you relate to? I mean, I was saying this not too long ago about not only family, but certain friends that I used to have and keep close. I'm like, who I am now, I don't rock or engage with people like you where I am now as far as from a geography standpoint, because I'm not in the closest interrelation and proximity with you from a residential standpoint. But where I'm at, I don't even talk or relate to people like this. So why should I relate to you just because of some kind of entitlement based on a past or who you used to represent. That doesn't mean that you represent that anymore, but I keep holding on to you like, you're still that person in my life. Or you may never have been that person, but I believed for you to be. But now that I know that you aren't, should I really continue to communicate and have a relationship with this person? Like, you really have to question that. I know I asked myself that. I was like, man, I don't even kick it with people like you in these days. The only reason I kick it with you is because, we go way back. But that's hypocritical. Because if I don't talk to people like you are where I'm at, like, what excuse is that? Like, that's not a valid excuse. That's hypocritical. Like, you cause me angst and frustration when we're in communication. So I need to cut you off, like, no different than anyone here that I would be introduced to and would rub me the wrong way. I wouldn't even kick it with them. Like, I'd immediately detract. And I should do the same thing in regards to these parents, family or friends. Although you may have learned to reject yourself thanks to an overly critical inner voice that expects perfection, you can reclaim your true self and genuine thoughts and feelings regardless of other people's reactions. You can claim the freedom to express yourself and take action on your own behalf. You're free to extend compassion to yourself and even grieve what you've lost as a result of having emotionally immature parents or people around you. You now know that your first job is your own self-care, including setting limits on how much you give, even to the point of suspending contact with these people or your parents if necessary. You no longer have to exhaust yourself with excessive empathy for other people. In addition, you're likely to find that your relationship with your parents become more tolerable as you relinquish the need for your emotional acceptance. And as you shed your old family role, you can relate to your parents or people more honestly without needing them to change. And lastly, I'm going to speak from a social standpoint, because in the old days, in this extreme conservatism of Christianity, they're like, being homosexual, trans, gay, LBGTQ of any sort, they would tell you that that's wrong. You can't be that, and you wind up ashamed or living in secret. And that secrecy eats away at you and psychologically kills you, or you will physically kill yourself because of your high insecurity and your continued level of anxiousness. Your high level of anxiousness. Being unanxious is not being nervous or unsure. You know what I'm saying? So I had to correct myself. But we just finished chapter 9, and our final chapter, which we may just cover in one episode in our next conversation, is titled How to Identify Emotionally Mature People. And it shouldn't be that hard once you've gone through the processes from chapter 1 beginning to current chapter 9. By this point, you understand completely what immaturity defines as. And everything that is against what you knew and what we have studied moving forward, you see where the different direction is at and how to get there and how to stay in tune and in line with that connection and that direction. You know what I'm saying? And I was gonna say, also with within society, once you feel like you have been manipulated, you don't have to continue to be fooled and believe the next lie that someone is trying to present you, trying to convince you that they want to help you, when in reality, they haven't been helping you, past their initial promises. It's just been broken promise after broken promise, after next lie, after next lie, after next broken promise. Like, you don't have to continue to be strung along, connected to those propaganda promises. You know what I'm saying? Move on and deter from that miserable direction and follow in the direction of glee and joy. You know what I'm saying? You need to be against everything that you are and that you represent when you carry and follow a high degree and level of misery. And on that note, we're going to check out of this episode. And I am going to state again, this is your neighborhood sensei Fouché. And I always first strongly suggest before emphatically imploring to all of you beautiful, wonderful, self-loving, worthy individuals to stay woke. But in the process, never ever let them get you all stressed out. Make sure you always take any meditative practices and procedures, including environmental change, when and if necessary, to decompress and relax. And always be aware by preparing yourself and taking notes. Until our next episode, be smooth in unity. 1.